In the previous video we used the grid layout manager, and in this video we'll be creating and reading from entry widgets. So we'll be adding entry widgets to our GUI and we'll read text from those entries, and it's not as straightforward as one might think. And first we'll update a button text, and then we'll add a label and update the label instead, and then we'll add some message boxes and update the message box instead, and in the end we also read the response from the message box. In order to use an entry widget, we have to use a special construct. We cannot simply assign a Python string to the text property, but we have to create a TStringVar. And then we use this stringVar we created and assign it to the entry text variable property. So we have to create a TKStringVar, save that in a variable, then we create our TTK entry. The GUI is a parent, we give it a width of 20 pixels, and then we set this guy here. Text variable is the StringVar variable we created. So when we run it, our GUI now has, we created two of them, so our GUI now has an entry widget next to each button, and in the first one I just created the StringVar by itself, and in the second one down here I set while creating the StringVar variable for entry 2 string, I set the value during the creation to some default text, just as default text. So that's what you can see here. And the width is 20, so we hard coded that. Be longer. So that's what we did. So again, it's a three-step process. First, we create the class instance to hold the StringVar. Then we assign it to a text variable. And now, in order to get the text out, we call get on the entry string1 variable. So I find a little bit because in the click event we use this variable here to get the text, but this variable basically isn't really doing anything, it seems. But because it has assigned to the text variable property of the entry, when we run it, it's kind of the middleman that gets the text. So here we get the text, update the button. Here we also update the button. When the entry is empty, that means it's an empty string. So we can type in here, and when we click the button now, the button has some text again. So again, it's a 1, 2, 3 step process. So the entry now is fully functional, so we can type in and get it here. We can also copy and paste from one entry to another. So I think that's quite neat. So it's really fully functional. And again, if we delete it, then we just delete, well, then it's an empty string. So now instead of updating the text of a button, we can create a label. We create a label here, that's a TK label. The GUI is the parent, and we give it a text of label. And we use the grid layout manager, so we put it in column 0, row 2. But here we do something new. We use column span equals 2. So it will span 2 columns. So even though it's positioned in row 0, it will span row 0 and row 1. I mean column 0 and column 1. So we have one button 0 and one button in column 1. So here we place it to the left, but because we use column span equals 2, we actually span it across those 2 columns. So when we run this, we can see that the label is not in column 0 here, but kind of more or less in the middle. And it actually is in the middle. So when we click here, we are now updating the label. We do update label config text, and the same thing, entry1 string.get, entry2 get. And one neat thing is when we clear out one of the entries and click the button, it will update the label. And actually the label seems to disappear because now it's an empty string. Again, so there's one way to clear it out. And this one here, we can see it more clearly that it's kind of centered. It's spanning those 2 columns, column 0 and column 1, because we're using column span equals 2. Now another thing is when we run it, we can see our labels here, and it's still centered. But let's say we type in a lot of text, can't see it anymore. Like our entry doesn't expand because we gave it a fixed size of width equals 20. And when we click that button, it expands the buttons and the entries because the label now is so much longer. It's actually longer than the width of the GUI. So if we do something shorter, we can see that the more we enter because of the grid layout management. So this label spans both columns and it pushes the column 0 and column 1 widgets over. We can easily display message boxes. So in order to do that, the first thing is we have to import message box from Tkinter. So we do from Tkinter import message box. And in the click event callback functions, we can call message box now message box.showInfo, show warning, or show error. So message boxes are standalone in Tkinter, so they don't have a parent. So the first argument we are passing is the title of the message box, and the second argument is the text that's being displayed within the message box. So here we're getting, again, from the first entry, we're getting the text, we're updating the label, and then we're calling the informational message box, and in the second one, for the second button and entry, we call the show warning message box. So when we run this, pretty simple, click here, and now what's in the entry here is being displayed down there. So yes, and again, if it's empty, then there's nothing in here, but you can see the different icons. So that's the warning message sign icon that ships with that show warning message box, and the other one displays this eye here. And then there's also the arrow one. That's the typical 3 icons we are used to, I think. You can also add some logic. So let's say for text 1, for the first entry box, if the text is empty, we say if there's text 1, then update the label and show the message box. But if it's empty, then we just don't fall into that code. So that's typical Python code. So there's some text here. We update the label and info text. And then if we have an empty string, nothing happens. What we also can do is, for the second message box, we can look for its response. So the message box returns something, and in our case we only have OK message boxes, so the message returned is OK, the RSP here is OK, and what we're doing here is typical Python. So we can just set the label to an empty text to basically clear out the label text. So here we say C message box, and the info text is being displayed here with the information icon. And when we clear it out, nothing happens. It doesn't clear the label here. When we click this guy, the text is being displayed. When we click OK, the label gets cleared. In this video, we added entry widgets and read from them. We added a label, positioned it in between columns and updated it. And we also created different message boxes, wrote to them and read their responses. In the next video, we will design menus.